The more he took it, in whatever form he was taking it, the more dangerous it was going to become.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we'll be discussing instances where monarchs allegedly met an ignoble, violent, or otherwise troubling end.
At 29 years old, James II was dead.
Drinking gold, flayed alive, Emperor Valerian. Many of the wildest stories surrounding deaths from antiquity remain difficult to fully research and understand. Roman Emperor Valerian has two different deaths to his name, with both sounding extremely unpleasant. Ancient historians, such as Eutropius, have written down tales of how Valerian was captured and held prisoner in Persia by that country's king, Shapur I.
No, you can't! Daddy, please!
One version of what eventually happened to Valerian states that he was forced to imbibe molten gold, while still another claims that he was flayed alive. Additionally, stories also circulated about how the Persians stuffed the remains of Valerian and kept the man's corpse on display as a trophy. Stabbed in the toilet, King Edmund Ironside. Mark Twain is attributed as saying, quote, "Never let the truth get in the way of a good story." Now, we wouldn't call what allegedly happened to King Edmund Ironside a good story per se, but it is what's endured since this monarch's death. Writings of the day don't necessarily refer to any foul play on the part of Ironside's death, which is thought to have occurred in London on November 30th, 1016. However, it didn't take very long for stories to arise about how Ironside was allegedly stabbed or shot with an arrow while utilizing a bathroom. Still other sources, such as Adam of Bremen, chronicled that Ironside had been poisoned, but it's the toilet take that's survived in the public consciousness. Sacrificial poisoning, John, King of England.
His father had called him John Lackland because there was originally no part of the huge Angevin Empire left for him.
Ask anybody who's ever played Oregon Trail. Dying of dysentery is no fun. And it's true that this was what eventually befell John, King of England, back in 1216. It's the legend of how this ill-favored monarch contracted the disease that remains most intriguing, however, since it actually involves a human sacrifice. Stories have been passed down about how a monk at Swineshead Abbey poisoned King John's wine with the toxin of a venomous toad.
He made his way to an abbey at Swineshead, where he was comforted with the monk's latest experiment in beer making, which seems to have brought on dysentery.
This monk's life was also forfeit from this action, since he was required to taste the king's wine prior to serving the table. Historians today admittedly cast a lot of doubt upon the veracity of this story, but what remains true was the ill will many had for King John's reign.
While fleeing for his life, King John died of dysentery. What was left of his treasure was never recovered.
Don't mess with Mom, Pyrrhus of Epirus. We can't help but wonder what other ancient wars might be like if every soldier and general had their respective mothers present on the battlefield. Legend states that it was the mother of a soldier present during the Battle of Argos who watched from above as her son battled Pyrrhus of Epirus, a Greek king for whom the phrase Pyrrhic victory is named. The woman reportedly tossed a heavy tile from her vantage point, which struck Pyrrhus and knocked him from his horse. Some sources claim that Pyrrhus perished from this strike, while still others state that the tile caused spinal paralysis. This enabled another soldier, Zopyrus of Macedon, to deliver the fatal blow. Disease and combustion? Henry VIII.
Master Holbein, it is well done.
We've probably all been injured at one point or another in our lives, perhaps even requiring some sort of physical therapy or medication in order to achieve recovery. Medicine wasn't exactly as we know it during the era of King Henry VIII, however, as evidenced by this monarch's steep decline in health after a jousting accident. The king sustained injuries to his legs that never fully healed, becoming infected and ulcerated.
The country is on the threshold of civil war. You have but a faint grip on the crown. Your enemies hide in the shadows.
Henry's weight ballooned as a result of his inactivity, which caused other maladies like scurvy and possibly gout to manifest themselves in his body. An additional, albeit unsubstantiated legend further states that Henry's gaseous corpse exploded while in state within a traveling coffin. Drinking mercury, Emperor Qin Shi Huang.
To the ancient mind, it must have seemed like a supernatural substance. There was nothing like it. I mean, the natural inclination is to think it has some power, that maybe if you took it into your body, then it would pass this magical property onto you and even perhaps help you prolong your life.
The history of feudal China is one rich with colorful characters and fascinating stories, including that of the country's very first emperor, Qin Shi Huang. This founder of the Qin dynasty was allegedly obsessed with immortality and tasked his court alchemists with creating elixirs that could prolong his life. Emperor Qin Shi Huang died in the summer of 210 BCE, with stories eventually surfacing that it was perhaps one of those same elixirs that caused his death at 49 years of age. This was due to the presence of poisonous mercury within their contents.
Well, did he succeed in becoming an immortal? Not perhaps in the literal sense that he wished, although who knows what genetic scientists may be able to do with the DNA of his body in the future.
Scream stroke, Emperor Valentinian I. William Shakespeare famously wrote, "Uneasy lies the head that wears the crown." This quote from King Henry IV goes a long way in describing the daily stresses and anxieties troubling just about any leader, never mind one from the ancient world. Emperor Valentinian was a ruler that was, unfortunately, quick-tempered and easy to anger, an aspect of his personality that would eventually become his undoing. The emperor suffered a fatal stroke after taking it upon himself to scream and shout at envoys from the Germanic tribe of Quadi, who were adversarial to Rome. Valentinian was later deified by his people, but we can't help but wonder if he regretted this decision in the afterlife.
You told me once you'd never heard the gods laughing. Listen.
Kaboomed. James II of Scotland.
James was in the middle of a long, hot summer campaign when he got the news that his queen, Mary, was arriving. He got one of the guns ready to fire a salute, but his grand gesture blew up in his face, literally.
Death on the battlefield is a risk that everybody takes whenever they engage in a war or conflict. It's likely, however, that they do not expect that death to occur at the business end of one of their own cannons. The reign of James II of Scotland was short and tumultuous, where this young monarch struggled to find his place as King of Scots. James's decision to utilize modern artillery on the battlefield had found him some success, but this interest also resulted in the king's demise. He was standing too close to one of his newly imported French cannons when it went off, and the resulting explosion killed James II on the spot.
The cannon exploded, my leg was shattered, I died of blood loss.
Rear-ended poker, Edward II of England. There's no clear answer as to what exactly happened to the exiled and imprisoned Edward II around the time of his death. Historians have settled on the 21st of September 1327 as an official date, although this is disputed by some. Additionally, all of those who know exactly how the deposed king died are all gone themselves, with stories fading into legend about King Edward II's grisly demise. The most famous of these stories involve a red-hot poker that was inserted violently into the king's rear end. This may come down to slander or propaganda, however, since rumors also spread about Edward's possible homosexuality. Essentially, historians can surmise that Edward II was probably murdered, they just can't agree upon how this occurred.
Thrusting an hollow instrument like the end of a trumpet or glister pipe into his fundament, and through it a red-hot iron up into his bowels, whereby he ended his life with a lamentable loud cry, heard by many both of the town and castle.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into settings and switch on your notifications. Death by consuming sea parasites, Henry I of England. Teachers have told us, parents have told us, Always listen to your doctor. Unfortunately, King Henry I of England didn't heed his royal physicians when they advised him to curb his appetite for sea lampreys. The meat of these fish can contain mercury or PCBs that can cause severe harm to the human body if ingested to excess. Unfortunately, excess was exactly what King Henry wanted at dinner time, and this decision resulted in a fatal illness. This King of England did live long enough to settle his debts and otherwise get his house in order, but if he had listened to his doctors, Henry's reign could have potentially lasted much longer.
A lamprey is a parasitic fish that looks as if it belongs in a bush tucker trial. Henry loved them. His doctor had put him on a diet that involved not eating lampreys, and he got a fever and died after ignoring the advice.
Are legends sometimes more interesting than the truth? How do you think these stories started in the first place? Let us know in the comments.
He was 67 years old, and he'd gone a long way towards defining the job of a King of England. But the fundamental problem, who was entitled to that job, had still not been solved.